Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Black History Month celebration, looking at restorative justice and restorative practices. I am Denise Boston, Equity and Restorative Practices Manager in Howard County's Office of Human Rights and Equity. I will be the moderator for our conversation today on restorative justice and restorative practices as a framework for responding to justice within the context of the roles that we all play in Howard County. I'm joined by two outstanding trailblazers and thought leaders. Police Chief Lisa Myers, welcome. And Rich Gibson Jr., State's Attorney for Howard County, welcome. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we embark on this conversation of restorative justice, we are inspired to acknowledge the history, beliefs, and land of the indigenous people of this area, who continue to inspire us with spirit, constructive resilience, and collective agency. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about our guest. Rich Gibson Jr. is a graduate from Howard University Law. He graduated in 2003. He's been a prosecutor for nearly 17 years. He doesn't look like it. In multiple jurisdictions throughout the state of Maryland. Rich has handled virtually every kind of criminal case one can imagine. Homicides, gang prosecutions, human trafficking, large drug trade organizations, and sex offenses. In 2016, he was recognized as Prosecutor of the Year for the Mid-Atlantic region of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Gang Network. In 2018, Rich was elected to be Howard County's state's attorney. He's the first African-American to hold this position. Thank you. And Police Chief Lisa Myers. Chief Myers is a 29-year veteran of the Howard County Police Department. She was appointed chief in February 2019. She began her career with HCPD in 1990 as a civilian crime lab technician. She entered the police academy in 1994 and worked in various components of the police department, including as the chief of staff, patrol division watch commander, supervision with youth services, public information officer, and community officer. She holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Coppin State University. Yay, Coppin! I taught at Coppin too. And since Chief Myers' appointment, she has implemented new initiatives to better serve the community and police department. She's launched a one-year field test to use drones in police operations, a realignment of patrol beats to improve response times and create a more equitable workload for officers, a reorganization of the police department structure to increase the efficiency of operations, and a partnership with local nonprofit Fidos for Freedom to bring comfort dogs to the 911 dispatch unit. Incredible work, both of you. Wonderful. And so, what is the topic of today? Restorative practices and restorative justice. The principles of restorative justice are based in indigenous principles of justice and collective resolution and conflict resolution, and places emphasis on healing the harm done by the offender and a restorative practice, by the offense and the restorative practices of the offender. So restorative healing circles and conferences are strategies to help develop a consensus on how to repair harmful results of the offense. So these approaches validate the experiences and the needs of everyone within the community, particularly those who've been marginalized, oppressed, and harmed. We're here to talk about the paradigm shift that is happening in our schools, criminal justice system, policing, organizations, and communities in order to ensure that everyone, especially the most underrepresented and historically marginalized have what they need in order to thrive, and recognizing that decisions have ethical implications, as well as the potential to foster equity for everyone. So restorative justice looks at caring for all individuals in the midst of harm, in the midst of crime, and the ways that we can restore and heal our communities. So in my role as equity and restorative practices leader, I am infusing an equity-centered framework within the organization of Howard County government by incorporating a strategic approach which fosters a shared vision of equity, inclusion, and community consciousness. A strategy that identifies evidence of the work of equity-centered systems and processes, and most of all, to harness the power of equitable community engagement to reset social inequities. And so that's the work that I'm doing around social justice and social healing, and making sure that we're all on the same page and have a shared vision of how our communities are respected and treated. I'm going to turn this over to Rich to ask Rich, how are you utilizing the whole concept of social justice in the work that you're doing in states of Burnett?
So again, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me. It's great to be here. It's an honor to speak with you, and important. It's an important discussion, right, related to restorative justice, related to social justice. So first off, you have to recognize that field of prosecution, there are very few people who look like me in these spaces, not just as electeds. I mean, in electeds, 95% of the nation's prosecutors happen to be white, right? But even just prosecutors, period, there aren't a lot of minorities, and certainly not Black men in the field of prosecution. And there really needs to be more, because the prosecutor is an entity that it has a say in deciding a lot of the key variables and key factors in the actual justice equation, what justice looks like, what offers are made, whether to charge, whether not to charge, what evidence and how the evidence will be unfolded in court, what sentence to recommend to the judge. The judge ends up is an entity that decides the outcome, but we make a recommendation to that judge to decide which way they should go. And so it's important that diverse frames of reference, diverse perspectives are in these spaces, because it impacts justice. People have blind spots that they're not attuned to, either due to implicit bias or just a lack of awareness of what walking in another person's shoes is, like walking among another person's shoes is. And so you really need to have diverse spaces in which these kind of judgments are made. Now, in terms of my actually employing it in our office, I believe that restorative justice focuses on rehabilitating offenders and forcing a reconciliation with victims and the community at large. It's an alternative to typical or traditional criminal prosecution. To be clear, I think the justice system is an appropriate tool to handle and address crime, but not all criminal behavior requires the weight of the justice system, and sometimes the outcomes that are reached are draconian. They're just overly harsh, right? And there's a lot of collateral consequences that have to be taken into account. You have to have a holistic view. So when you expose someone to the justice system, some of the collateral consequences are, you can't get student loans depending on your conviction. Business loans, you have a hard time getting those, or may not be able to get them. Certain employment you can't have. Military admissibility, housing, where you live, where you can live. Public social benefits like food stamps and federal cash assistance, the right to bear arms, even traveling abroad, or in some cases being deported from this country based upon the crime you've committed. These are all collateral impacts that have to be analyzed. And there are times when the crime committed does not bear or should not kind of be met with that stiff a penalty, that stiff a response. There are certainly times where it does deserve every bit of that and more, and we are willing to bring it to bear when necessary, but we have the awareness and judgment of those circumstances where it shouldn't. So my office, under my leadership, does strive to utilize restorative justice practices when appropriate. There's several factors we look at when deciding whether or not we're going to go traditional route versus the restorative route. Those factors could be the type of offense committed. Obviously, if it's a child molestation situation or a child pornography case, really don't have a lot of room to work with that, because that kind of offense is horrific. Relationship between the defendant and the victim. Is the incident likely to reoccur? Or is it something that we can kind of just, it's a one-time thing that we can kind of nip in the bud and push a different direction? The criminal record or criminal history of the defendant who's alleged to have committed the crime, and is the victim amenable to pursuing this in a different way? So these are kind of the factors we look at when employing restorative justice approaches. We've done it in a handful of cases. I'll get into the challenges later, but you have to be very careful with when you employ these strategies, because if we're wrong, society is going to bear a consequence. If I bet on you and I have faith in you, and I take this alternate approach in your instance, and then my judgment is an error. Of course, I don't want to add my conscience. I don't want someone else to get hurt. But if that person who I give a break to goes out and murders a bus full of nuns, that's going to be a problem. The community is going to be very incensed, rightfully so. And so you have to be very judicious in what circumstances you apply this approach. But I'm open to the approach, and we have done it several times. I'll defer to Chief Myers, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Yes, I appreciate the response and the candidness of how, this paradigm is a new concept in many, many ways, a different alternative in the way that we're doing this work. And it takes a lot of education to really encourage people to even take it seriously. So I think what you're embarking upon is really important, and the open-mindedness that you have around an alternative way of looking at justice. Chief Myers, how does this sit with you in the position? I mean, I know it's challenging. We'll talk about that later, but how are you looking at social justice?
So certainly, like any discipline, policing is evolving, as it should. I kind of look back at how we policed when I started in the 90s to how we are policing today, and it's substantially different. And part of that has to do with infusing racial equity and fairness and inclusion to how we do business. So some examples of it would be from training. We have moved away from that paradigm where we only train our officers for defensive tactics. We need to make sure that our officers are as competent defending themselves as they are de-escalating a situation. We realize that now with training, we have to do more with making sure our officers are trained in crisis intervention training, in mental health, and awareness of drug addiction issues. And while we can have all of the counselors in the world, police officers are often those first responders. So they need to have those skills in place. If we look at things like enforcement, back in the 90s when I started out, we had quotas. So each night you came in, you had to write so many tickets, or, they wanted you to have so many arrests at the end of the month. And the whole idea was to kind of get officers out and working and busy in the community. But many times those very strategies have caused us to alienate the very communities that we should build relationships in. So some of the things we do now that are substantially different is we look at quality of work versus quantity. So I don't want an officer to bring me 500 traffic citations in a month if it means that he or she has alienated an entire community. What I want our officers to do is to be strategic about that enforcement. Then if we have people blowing stop signs and causing accidents in a particular intersection, then certainly that is how I want our officers to concentrate their enforcement. The other thing, the lens that we have to look at from a social justice perspective is making sure we are attracting diversity to the police department. And that is absolutely huge. And while I talk about diversity in terms of the lens of social justice, it can also be a challenge. We need to make sure the makeup of our police department reflects the community in which we serve. And that also has some impact on how we look at policy and how we look at enforcement strategies and having sensitivities to different communities. So it has really forced us to look at policing in a different way. And probably one of the biggest things is looking at alternative means to arrest. And that's not saying that we're not out doing enforcement, but we are looking at those things, particularly for first-time nonviolent offenders. Is an arrest really the best choice for a situation? So for a number of years in our police department, we have had youth diversion programs. And basically, if you have a nonviolent offender, maybe someone who's charged with disorderly conduct or for theft, shoplifting at the mall, we look at, is this person better served in the juvenile justice system? Or are there some restorative things that we can look at? So some of the things we look at is shoplifting workshops. Sometimes it may be tours of shock trauma if there's a drug or alcohol issue, making sure people are getting the appropriate assessments that they need to have. We just started something just a year ago called Teen Court. And basically what happens with the teen court is we have youth volunteers and we have a volunteer judge in Howard County. And those youth are trained that they go through and they kind of manage the trial themselves. So if it's a juvenile, maybe charged with shoplifting, they have their peers go through and assess and work through to figure out what is most appropriate, what is beneficial. And oftentimes it's a learning process across the board. And I'm really proud to say we have amazingly strong partnerships with our state's attorney's office. You know, from a policing perspective, you know, there have been times when departments operate in a vacuum, but quite often we rely on the direction of our state's attorney to review our cases, to look at search warrants, to make sure they're good and we have probable cause. And we have a great relationship. And state's attorney Gibson will sometimes say, hey, this looks good, but I'd like you to go back and maybe strengthen something. So it helps us to be better and making sure we are doing the best job to serve our community. And one of the things that we are working on collaboratively through both of our offices is an adult diversion program. So for the first time, we're looking at that with nonviolent adult offenders. So again, just kind of using that social lens,
Yes.
restorative justice, like the state's attorney said, to apply it where appropriate,
Yes.
to better serve our community, to make sure we are not criminalizing things that are maybe mental health or drug addiction issues.
Yes. And it sounds as if the two of you are really working conjointly at this whole thing around social justice. What does it mean to be fair and equitable? And to really look at the lived experiences of all the people that we're working with. I love that connection. And it does take a community. It does take a village to do this work. Before I go into challenges, I think I would love for people to hear about, and I'll stay with you, Chief Myers. Who was your mentor? Who inspired you to be innovative, to think very cautiously and thoughtfully about the work that you're doing? Because I know a lot of young people may be watching this and they may be looking at the three of us to say, wow, you know, how did they make it to where they are? I would love you to talk a little bit about who inspired you to do this work.
Thank you. Thank you for that opportunity. So there are two Black female officers who are now retired, Karen Burnett and Tara Nelson, who were totally my inspiration. When I started in the 90s, it was unusual, one, to see Black women in leadership. And they were very strong, very fair, well respected. And they taught me about managing people, about how you need to get buy-in, pull people in, listen to diverse ideas. If you build into other people, oftentimes they will do an amazing job for you. So those women really served as a beacon for how I should walk and how I should navigate within the police department. And I think they even helped me to be a little bit tougher because I was a lot more timid when I started out. But it was really nice, and it is so important, particularly in our minority community, not just for young people, but even for professionals like myself. And I'm sure the state's attorney will agree, to be able to see someone who looks like you
Yes.
as a model to navigate your way through.
Thank you. And Rich, Mr. State's Attorney, who inspired you?
So I'll put it this way. So I didn't, this is not a job that I knew I wanted to do my whole life. Matter of fact, I didn't know, I wasn't sure I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I said didn't want to be a lawyer, that's the wrong way to put it. I wasn't trying to become a lawyer. I'm not one of those people who, from the time I was a baby, I knew I wanted to argue in court. And that wasn't me. I was someone who just believed, my parents instilled in me the idea of education and keeping your options open, right? Like always open more doors than you close through your actions, through your behaviors, through your living, right? Open more doors than you close. And so my initial goal was actually to be a Secret Service agent. So I was going, when I went to undergrad, I wanted to be a Secret Service agent. That was my goal. I applied to be a Secret Service agent, and it takes about a year and a half, 18 months or so to get through that process, background checks, mental exam, physical exam, intelligence test, panel interviews, polygraph, all that good stuff. And so while that's all going on, I thought to myself, well, I don't know if it's going to work out or not. Better have a backup plan. And so I took the LSAT, and the LSAT's a test to go to law school. And I was always a relatively decent student, and I did well on the test, and I got scholarships to go to every law school I applied to. I chose to go to Howard because I'd gone to a PWI, a predominantly white institution, for undergrad, and
Yes.
I wanted to experience what an HBCU was like, and it was transformative. It was so in terms of who inspires me, you can't go to Howard without being impacted by it.
That's right.
And any student that's come through Howard Law School knows the history of Charles Hamilton Houston, who was the architect behind Brown v. Board of Ed. So Thurgood Marshall argued it. The guy on the wall behind me, he argued it, but he was just he was executing the plan that Charles Hamilton Houston crafted, right? And Charles Hamilton Houston famously said, a lawyer is either a social parasite or a social engineer, right? So you're either using your knowledge of the law to advance yourself at the expense of the community, or you're using your knowledge of the law to make the community a better place, the place that we all want it to be. And for me, being a social engineer, and in particular tying that to this role, is huge. And that to me is a real draw. So Charles Hamilton Houston is an inspiration, and Charles Hamilton Houston is an inspiration. And I think I answered the question. I hope I answered it.
You did answered it beautifully. And to tie in HBCUs, is just how important those institutions are for our growth and development.
Absolutely.
I didn't go to an HBCU because I majored in theater, surprisingly. I thought I was going to be an actor. And so my BFA is in theater.
Okay.
And so I couldn't find an HBCU where I could really dig my feet into having that as a craft. But once I graduated, I made it I was committed to teaching in HBCU. So I've taught at Bowie, and I've taught at Coppin, and I taught at Sojourner Douglas College that was in Baltimore, and have done a lot of work working with professors in Howard University. I've worked with Dr. Hope Hill at Howard University.
Okay.
In the counseling psychology program, because I became a researcher. So out of my theater work, I was inspired to use the arts as a way of healing. And a lot of the research that I've done in Washington, D.C. has been around violence intervention, alcohol and drug intervention, looking at families and trauma. So I married expressive arts therapy with healing in the work, and that's what I've been doing as a professional in higher education, and stumbled upon diversity, equity, and inclusion because that was the way I was teaching. I taught my classes, my students knew I was a fair professor, even though I was hard and strict. I looked at the way their lived experience in the classroom and wanted to inspire them to use their gifts and their heritage and their unique identities to make a difference in the world. And so that's how I came into this whole concept of social justice. I think my mentors have been looking at my elders in the community. I was always inspired by the older people around me, whether it was my parents, whether it was my grandparents, whether it was elders at the church. I always kind of looked at them and said, you know, you've got something going on. I want to know what is your method of living so long? And they would say, caring about people. They would say, loving people. They would say, give back to the community, like you just said, Rich, give back. So I think it's important for our young people to see intergenerational mentorship, and to know that our ambassadors are people around us that you would never think of. I remember, I grew up in Columbia back in the 70s, and I remember an inspiration to us was Mr. Little, and he was in charge of the recreation center. Didn't have a degree, right? But he loved us so deeply that we didn't get in trouble in Columbia. Right? Because he kept an eye on us. He gave us parties. He let us party at the center. He took us on field trips. But I'm saying that our ambassadors in the community are people that you least expect, you know? And so I think that I love to hear your stories. And I think it's great for people to hear our stories to what led us to the work that we're doing today, and why social justice and restorative justice is part of our DNA of who we are. Now I want to go to, we got this paradigm that we've been working with. Rich, what has been challenging about bringing in an alternative way of looking at justice?
So again, you really, the heart of it is, for me, I wrestle, and what's most important about my job, the most difficult thing, but also it's rewarding as well, is getting it right. I am responsible for exercising my judgment on behalf of this community in ways that are consistent with the community's values and my 17 years of experience dealing with crime, right? So, and from my prosecutorial perspective, and you have to take a holistic approach, as I said before, but as I said earlier, as I alluded to earlier, if you give someone a break and they go out and commit a further harm, the argument is going to be generated, well, you could have done something, you could have stopped that secondary action from occurring if you just interceded properly, quote unquote, at that first chance, right? And
when you say properly, is that punitively?
Punitively, yes. Consistent with a traditional approach. Punitive is the wrong word. Just consistent with a traditional approach. So there's you know, in a case that you deem appropriate, there's two paths, right? I can choose to take a restorative approach that doesn't involve the justice system at all, or involves it in a relatively minor way, or I can take a more traditional approach that provide. I'll give you an example. So
okay.
So I had a case. It came in. Our office is 76 people, but every week we have it today. As a matter of fact, senior staff is every Thursday. And so on Thursdays in the evening or in the afternoon, we meet and go over all of the upcoming cases that are going on, just so I'm abreast of them. I give them input and guidance as it relates to those cases as they're coming in. And one senior staff in March of 2019, I was told about a case where a young man who was 18, the facts of the case were that he was working at the time at a restaurant in Howard County, and he had no criminal record. He committed an unusual robbery. So he goes to this restaurant and he approaches his friends. He worked at the restaurant. And the whole thing's caught on video, so there's no evidentiary issues. Like we know what we know definitively. He approaches the friend of his. He produces what appears to be a gun, and he demands money, right? The friend does something unusual. The friend laughs. The person who's being accosted with a weapon laughs. You see him laugh on camera and says, "I'm not giving you any money. You're not getting any." And the defendant did something that was also unusual. He didn't, escalate the situation. He puts the gun away, sits down, and just hangs out with the victim on camera. It's very unusual. Like, I've seen thousands of robberies that don't typically occur this way, right?
Yeah.
That offense, we have the evidence, we can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. That offense carries 45 years in jail. 20 for the robbery, deadly weapon, 20 for assault without for the handgun crime of violence, and he was 18, so 5 years incarceration for handgun possession underage, under 21. You can't possess a handgun under the age of 21 in the state of Maryland. So that's 45 years in jail that particular individual is facing. But this crime's highly unusual, and he has no record, and he's never been in trouble before. And the victim and the defendant were hanging out after the incident. These things don't happen. So I said, let's explore options. And so I had the attorney who was assigned the case reach out to the defense counsel to get more information. I had them reach out to the victim to find out, was the victim amenable to proceeding in a different way? And this is a robbery. This is not nothing. These are serious charges, and I take them seriously.
Yes.
Right? Victim is amenable, says that his friend was just being an idiot, and he knew he was being an idiot, and he wasn't afraid at all. And, the reaction was consistent with what he relayed to us, right? No money changed hands, so the store wasn't inconvenienced. The actual the establishment didn't suffer anything. The defendant was basically just, for lack of better words, young and dumb, and just did something that was really, really not smart that carries a incredibly serious sentence. Now, just to be clear, while that crime carries a 45-year maximum penalty, the likelihood is that he would get something far less than that. But all those collateral consequences I listed out before, not being, your ability to get other jobs, join the military, student loans, business loans, certain housing, this person's life is going to crater and just immediately take a different trajectory.
Yes.
And so now the question becomes, what do you do? It's a serious crime. If he does it again in the future, it could end really ugly. But in his favor, all the oddities that we pointed out already. So you have to weigh that. And in the end, we chose to take a restorative justice approach with that individual. I've been fortunate, and I knock on wood every day, that person is not reoffended.
I'm knocking on wood too.
Right? And look, and so this is also the community buy-in part, and the community support part is essential. When you're in leadership, there's two paths. One part of a leader is to exercise your judgment about what you see as best, and to lead, to actually be a voice for what you know based on your experience is best. The other part of leadership is being reflective, to reflect what the community wants to see. And so it may not be your own individual choice, but you're also just looking at, what does the community want, and how would the community want me to conduct myself? Because I have to reflect their values. Because look, every 4 years, if they don't like what I'm doing, they can say, get out, new person in. And I love my job, and I get a lot of pleasure from it, and I don't want it to just end like that, right?
Yes.
And so if we're going to take one of the biggest challenges, that we're going to take these approaches, we need the community support, because despite our best efforts, despite all of the cautiousness and the judiciousness with which we analyze these things, inevitably, people are human, and they will let you down. And my best judgment, which I don't do it willy-nilly. I'm very cautious, but you have to be careful.
Yes.
Right. And when something does happen, I'm going to need the community support to say, look, we understand the tragedy that unfolded and we want the appropriate justice to be met out. But we also don't want Rich or anyone, our state's attorney, to treat crime as a hammer and nails proposition where it's just one solution to each problem and banging those nails. We want our state's attorneys to look for alternate paths because that reflects our values in our community. So I do need the community support in order to engage in these things. It's one of the most challenging things. And again, I'm very, very cautious. I don't do it often. Like restorative justice practices, you need to be very careful with because I take my responsibility to keeping this community safe it's sacred. It's sacred.
Yes.
I take it very seriously. And I would feel horrible if someone else was harmed because I exercised my judgment in error. And so I'm very careful about it. But we've done it in a handful of cases. And it's always challenging. It's always something to do very, very carefully. And that's the biggest. There's other challenges, but that is undoubtedly the largest challenge to me associated with this process.
Yeah. How do you balance care and looking at the right thing to do? You know, are they separate, or can we bring the two of them together where it's not such a separate thing to look at? Yeah, caring for what you're doing. I think you're bringing restorative practices just in your emotional connection to the work. I think that's not separate. That's beautiful. That's a really great story of what the challenges could look like. Chief Myers, I know you have a story.
So probably a couple of things in talking about challenges. I can think of three that really stand out. One is being our ability to recruit for diversity. So this profession has never been one that has attracted minorities or a ton. And then if you look at what's happening with the social justice movement, every day I turn on the TV, I see a video that just makes me want to bury my head in the sand of some officer that's acting, I won't even say inappropriately, in many instances acting criminally. So it continues to make it tough to recruit for that diversity that we need and that we need to reflect our community. The other piece of that is building communities' trust, and it goes back to that video. We spend a lot of money and training over and beyond the minimal standard that the Training Commission asked us to train our officers. We're an accredited police department to make sure we're following best practices. Yet every time you turn on a TV and see a video of an officer acting inappropriately, it just puts a ding to our credibility. It doesn't matter if it's something that's happened across the country. You know, we feel that here locally.
Yes.
So a lot for us is building those community relationships. We have that pool of people who follow us on social media and who drop off cookies, but getting into those communities that hold up signs that say, you know, hey, F you, we think your profession is doing a terrible job. We are still their police department, and we have to find a way to connect and do that through creative programming, through looking at partnerships. But part of that is we have to be able to come to the table and to have some dialogue. One of the things I've found in recent times as we have discussions about, be it SROs or use of force with officers or what reform looks like in policing, oftentimes those conversations are done in silos. Police are having a conversation, and then the community is on the other side having a conversation, when really we need to work together to talk about that change, because we want that change to be meaningful, and we want it to apply to what's happening here in the county so that we can best protect and pull in our whole community. The other piece that presents a challenge is certainly the budget. And you might say, well, what does the budget have to do with restorative justice? Well, it has a lot to do with it. If we are stretched thin and don't have enough officers and they're stressed going from call to call to call, it's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
If we're not able to train our officers in crisis intervention techniques, training them on how to de-escalate situations, if we aren't able to vet our officers well so that we're not holding on to officers who have no business belonging in this profession because
Yes.
we don't have the budget to go through and hire better people, it creates an issue. And
Exactly.
probably most importantly, when we talk about things like body-worn cameras, things that the community talks about and would probably feel more of a sense of their departments being transparent, that translates into dollars, extremely expensive. So in
Yes.
order for us to get those practices in place and have the equipment and the things that we need to look at it from a fiscal perspective as well.
Definitely. I totally agree that the budget is part of transformation. You know, you can't transform and be innovative without the budget.
Exactly.
that validates that. I would also say a challenge for me is for having other people understand that we have to assess how well we're doing. And that also is money. And so to take a look at how beneficial has it been to have this kind of restorative social justice lens and equity lens in the work that we do? And how do we know that we're successful? And how do we hold folks accountable for this work if we're going to infuse it in our strategic plans? So I think that assessment is also a part of the work that we're talking about. How do we measure success? How does our community measure our success? Do we go back to the communities and say, do you see a different world since we've been in positions that we've been in? And what can we do better? And so how can we continue to do self-assessment internally and assessment externally as well? I think that the two of you are just amazing. And we've had a great conversation today. And I want to open it up now for other folks to ask any questions. And we have Marla on hand for us. Marla, is there any questions out there that's pressing, or that you have a question for any one of us?
In the words of our great Auntie Maxine, I'm going to defer my time to reclaim my time, and because we have Janssen Evelyn here, and he is the Assistant Chief Administrator Officer of the Department of County Administration. He is a lawyer, and he is doing the same things you're doing. So I'm going to turn that time to him to join the conversation. And I thank you all so much. This has been so deep, and you all have skin in the game, and you wear it so well. So I'm just going to sit back here.
Thank you. Janssen, welcome.
Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And if I ever needed a hype man, I would definitely always go to Marla. I think she kind of oversold me. I'm just honored to be in the presence of such high-class trailblazers. I look at Chief Myers, whom I've known before she was the police chief, where she was doing, I can tell you, she's not just talking about doing this work. When she was a captain in the police department, I had many deep conversations about her with respects to how she sought to recruit and make sure that we have diversity that reflects the population and the police department serves, so that they, and as well as grooming young officers to promote, because ultimately, and you guys are all in leadership roles, and you know when you're in those roles, you have a certain level of influence that actually opens the floodgates. So I'm just honored to be in the presence of Chief Myers, first African-American female police chief. I'm honored to be in the presence of Dr. Boston, the first ever equity and restorative practices manager, who, when I was also humbled to be involved in the process of creating the position and help and being on the interview panel. And when I met her, I told my bosses, I guess it's plural. I told my bosses, like, we just saw Oracle. We just saw the Oracle from the Matrix. I'm also, of course, I don't want to say I saved the best for last, but I'm obviously partial to my man, State's Attorney Gibson. I'm biased because, like me, he's also, we share common heritage from the Barbados diaspora. So I just love to listen to all three of you as you talk. I love to, from the back, the shadows, observe all the work that you guys are doing. And any time I get to intersect, it's humbling. This has been very educational, and as you know, it was recorded, and this discussion will be shared on Office of Human Rights and Equity social media channels. But I wanted to first come and say, on behalf of the County Executive, Calvin Ball, thank you for, one, the work you guys have been doing, but also taking part in this. This is the Office of Human Rights' first, virtual expo, and we hope to do this in person next year. And so this is a first for us, and we thank you for being part of this inaugural series. I do actually have because I'm nosy, I actually have a question, probably for all three of you. First, I'll start with Chief Myers. Chief Myers, I saw someone made a comment. I don't know. First, Marla, are there any questions that were coming from the viewers that
we have Denise saying thanks for all of the transformative conversation. So if anybody else wants to add to it, you have a platform with people who care and will answer the questions and will leave contact information. They're not going to give you their personal cell numbers or their home address, but they are very accessible, and they want to improve Howard County for all residents. This might be Black History Month Expo and excellence, but excellence for us is not pie. If I'm excellent, it doesn't mean you don't get to have a piece of excellence too.
Preach. So I guess my first question, Chief Myers, is, again, I'm very familiar with your career and all the work you've done, but when it comes to, and you've talked a bit at length about community policing, what are some of the ways that Howard County Police Department, particularly under your leadership, have been trying to make those inroads in the spaces that are historically distrustful? I mean, I saw during the rally, I was honored to walk with you, march with you, as you held up the signs, as you showed solidarity with the protesters, because this impacts your family, impacts you as well. But what are some of the ways that on a departmental level you've been leading your department and actually making those inroads?
That's a very good question. So the first thing really has been looking at our internal culture as a police department. I think sometimes what has happened, we have a very robust community outreach division, and officers will tend to say, well, the community outreach part belongs to the outreach division, when really it belongs to all of us. So making sure that internal culture, that internal messaging on what the expectations are there. We have always, as a police department, been very big on building community relationships. So we meet on a regular basis with the NAACP, with the African American Community Roundtable. We try to form bonds with our Black churches in the community, because many of our community members are attending those churches, and that's how we build the credibility. We look at doing joint community activities as well as information sessions. We certainly look at trying to recruit for diversity and providing opportunities. And even with our programming, in terms of looking at programming that is not as traditional, that would attract a lot of our young students. Some of the things in the schools, with many of our minority students, don't feel comfortable with the uniform and approaching the uniform. So we're looking at doing something different with uniforms for our officers who are working in schools and youth programs. So we continue to look at ways to build strong relationships with our community. Probably one of my biggest frustrations, I will say, is during this police reform time. This is a huge opportunity to make changes and do things within this police department now. If we can have that dialogue, but oftentimes it's tough because people feel that, okay, we're trying to get reform, so we want to do that separately. But I am waiting once legislation has passed and we know what direction we're going to go in, to start meeting with those groups and really looking at making substantive changes and looking at trying to get people on our youth advisory council and on our citizens advisory council, where I am meeting with those groups on a regular basis to talk about the police department and what it needs to look like in terms of its relationship with the community.
Thank you so much. And I also, it wasn't lost to me, I have a feeling you purposely made that reference about the budget early, and I was like, look, that wasn't lost on me. I was
Hey,
like,
I'm
well
just
played,
saying.
Chief Myers, well played.
Use every opportunity.
My next question is kind of a bit of a follow-up to State's Attorney Richard Gibson, or unless I can just call you Mr. Gibson. I was curious because I feel like as a state's attorney, that office is in this position where they're both their job historically has been the spear or the sword. Their job is to prosecute and put away those that do harm in our communities, regardless of where they come from and who they are. But now in this time where everyone's talking about, justice, access to justice, and these are important, necessary conversations, especially when you talk about the criminal justice system with respects to even procedural justice. How do you live between that tension of both having to be the sword that puts away people that do harm to our communities with the need for procedural justice?
So ironically, there is no tension. So my philosophy has never changed, right? My philosophy is our job as prosecutors is really, we are truth seekers, and we're accountability agents, right? And so mission one is what happened. There are all kinds of allegations. Police file a police report. It contains an allegation. A citizen comes in and says someone did something. That's an allegation. Our job is to take that allegation and work it down to discern, is the allegation founded? Is it supported by fact? Is it truthful? Does it bear weight, right? So first question is, you have to be curious, right? If you have a curious mind. So what happened? If your research into what happened leads you to believe that a crime was committed, then the next question is, who did it, right? So what happened? Once you resolve that a crime was committed, it's who did the crime. Once you resolve that question of who did the crime, then comes the third issue. Justice, when people talk about justice is actually the third piece of the analysis. It's what happened, who did it, and then what's the right result?
Yes.
So the right result could be don't do it again, or the right result could be me burying you under a jail cell for the rest of your existence. And depends on the facts of the case, right? But that has always been my approach to the issue. Related to sword and spear, it's always been about fairness. It's always been about equity. It's always been about doing the right thing, right?
Yes.
And part of it has to do with the, again, I've been doing this for 17 years, and I've done it in multiple jurisdictions. I've seen man's inhumanity to man on full display. So I've seen you can picture up your worst image, and believe me, I've seen it and seen double, okay? And that's just that comes with the job, right? So horrific stuff I've seen in that 17 years. I was in Baltimore for 12 of those 17 years. I was in Prince George's County before that, right? Howard County is a piece of cake by comparison. And we still have all those problems. Don't make no mistake. But just the frequency of them is less. But when people talk about social justice, they focus on defendants. And it's absolutely true that there's an endless supply of people that look like you and me that are in those that are in chains in courtrooms across this country. Howard County is no different.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an important fact that gets left out. I speak for the victims, okay? And crime happens to be intra-racial, right? And that gets left out of the equation all the time. Crime is intra-racial. So that means white defendant, 9 out of 10 times, white victim. Black defendant, 9 out of 10 times, black victim. So the vast majority of the time that you're seeing a black defendant that did something that was bad or is alleged to do something that's bad, there's a black family that's suffering on the other end of that equation. And I fight for them. I identify with them and I speak for them and I sleep great. So there is no tension for me at all in that regard.
Wow. Great response and honest response. Yeah. And I guess obviously, and it's why this type of dialogue is necessary because, individual, even though I have practiced for over 15 years, the reality is I was on the civil side. So I've never lived in that world. And so my perspective is similar to that of the typical outsider who sees wow, how does this work when there've historically been these access to justice or even procedural injustice. But that's definitely a good point to reinforce how ultimately there's one, no tension, and two, that your job, I think a lot of people, especially in the justice arena, forget that it's 9 out of 10 times it's like white on white or black on black. And so you're there to be an advocate on behalf of victims that look like us. So no, that's a very, very good reinforcement that I forget on occasion. I know it's pushing 2:28, but Dr. Boston, I actually have a question for you too. And again, I know I was involved in I was humbly involved in helping this position come into fruition. But I look at the mission and the task you have in front of you, and I believe it's such a huge undertaking. Like, how do you not get overwhelmed with something where the mission is both to make sure that there's equity occurring both on an internal county basis as well as to then do it on the community level? How do you not get overwhelmed, I would say, by that process? And how do you respond to, I would say, I know there's a developing divergent view within this space about how the DEI discussion oftentimes does more harm than good. And how do you deal with, one, a response to those critiques as well as the huge undertaking of this position?
I think that's a great question to pose at the end of our conversation today. And I want to go on a good note, but I want to also say—
That is a good note. That's an alley-oop. That's an alley-oop.
Well, I think to answer succinctly, I would say creating relationships that's trusting, that's authentic, that's real. That's the only way we can do our work. We can't do this work alone. It's a collective venture. It's helping people understand that having diversity means being exposed to excellence from many different perspectives. So it's not just diversity of ethnicity and the diversity of gender, it's the diversity of thought leaders. You have so many different perspectives coming in, you can't help but be great. So I know we're going to be great as a county. We're going to collectively utilize each other's greatness to do great things. So I just want to say thank you. And I see your hand go up. Yes?
Sorry, Denise, I apologize. There was a question. I just want to make sure that we answer the question that everyone had. Someone asked the question about trends for hate crimes. I think that's what I saw. Just Q&A. What trends are you seeing in hate crimes in Howard County? So I'm sorry, Denise. I just want to make sure that we answer questions for whoever's listening so they know.
Go ahead.
So we have had, we do have hate crimes here. They haven't been exploding or anything like that, but we do have hate crimes here. Chief Myers and I spoke yesterday about some of the incidents that occurred. There was a bunch of, I guess, Asian stores that were near the Columbia Mall, but it turns out that it wasn't related to them being Asian. It wasn't racially animus, like motivated. It was in fact just a series of people that were burglarizing stores. They happened to have chosen stores that were of an Asian heritage or affiliated with an Asian heritage, but they weren't targeting the Asian community. We have had some nooses recently, some issues with people like leaving nooses in either public spaces to scare or intimidate people, or in one instance in a store. That is recent. As of last year, that action has actually been criminalized if we can prove, like leaving a noose in the past wouldn't have been against the law. It's right. Freedom of speech. As of last year, I believe, or year before, the legislature criminalized actions done with the intent to intimidate or incite fear. That's a question to analyze, like from the mindset of the person. Do they intend to incite fear by putting this noose here or not? But we have had a couple cases like that we're actually looking at now, and I don't want to say anything more because we're actually looking at them currently. It's not out of hand, but just like everywhere else, we have, bad actors in our community too. But it's not at a level where it's chronic or at a level where it's a crisis at this point in time.
Thank you for interceding with that, because I think it's important for our guests to understand that we live in a world that's a part of the whole world. We're not separate from what's going on out here. I think that this is a wonderful opportunity to say, will you guys come back? Will you please come back for part 2?
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
So that we can really have a more face-to-face next time opportunity to talk about issues that's prevalent in our communities and the great work that we're doing to really make a difference. So thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be with both of you. Thank you, Janssen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janssen.
Thank you, Jason. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you. I'm just gonna come on camera so you can see me go, thank you. This panel was lit, and it was everything, and it was soul food. And I know that the people appreciate it because we're getting some honest talk from our leaders, those that represent us, that look like us, and that's amazing. So I'll see you. I'm gonna schedule another one in a few weeks.
Whatever you
part
need.
2.
Whatever you need.
Somebody, look, enough said. They said, look, I got some love on the screen. They want to see you again.
No problem. Thank
Bye,
you
everyone.
all. I hope you stay safe.
Stay safe. Be well.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right. So before I actually just dive into the presentation, this slide that you see, a lot of people have seen it, and it is an icebreaker for a lot of the different presentations and seminars, and people look at it as the glass half full, half empty. And people are asked to look and analyze this glass and say, well, how do you view it? And some people will say, well, it's half full, and other people will say it's half empty. And it kind of looks at your thought process and your perspective. So if you are looking at this glass and you say, well, it's half full, then people when they get analyzed, they say, well, it kind of looks like you are very hopeful and positive, and you are an optimist. Or those individuals who look at the glass and say, well, it's half empty, when the people are analyzed, they're said to be, you might have a little bit of pessimism to you, and it's all about your perspective on how you look at things. But I am presenting this glass to you, and I'm not going to ask you that question, is it half full or half empty? I'm going to say to you, when you look at this glass, how many ounces of water do you see in this glass? Do you think it's 4 ounces? Do you think it's 8 ounces? Let's just take a second. Somebody just type in the chat box and let me know, how many ounces do you see when you look at this glass? So just take a second. I'm looking at the chat to see what might pop up. I see Marla, 6 ounces. Anybody else? 6 ounces. We're gonna go once. We're going twice. Everybody is gonna feel good at saying that it's 6 ounces of water. Okay, well, good.
We have 4 ounces, Myra.
You have 4 ounces? See, I can't see that on the chat. Okay. 4 ounces, 6 ounces. Well, there we go. Juanita, 4 ounces. So if Juanita is saying 4 ounces and Marla is saying 6 ounces, what I'm going to say is it doesn't really matter how many ounces of water is in this glass, because if I asked you, let's just take 4 ounces. If I ask you to take that glass of 4 ounces and hold it out and hold it for 2 minutes, you're gonna say, oh, that's easy peasy. It's 4 ounces of water, I'm just gonna hold it for 2 minutes, right? So when 2 minutes is up, I'm gonna say, I need for you to hold it for another 15 minutes, and you can't use anything to support you. You can't use your hand, you can't drop your hand. And you're gonna look at me a little funny and be like, okay, it's only 4 ounces of water, but I can do this for 15 minutes. And so then after 15 minutes goes by, I'm gonna say, you know what, I changed my mind. I need for you to hold that 4 ounces of water for 90 minutes. Okay, so now you're gonna sit and be like, okay, my arm is getting a little tired. When we reach the 90 minutes, you might be shaking a little bit and you might have a little tenderness in your arm. And I'm gonna look at you and say, well, 90 minutes isn't good enough. I need for you to hold that 4 ounces of water for 1 month. And you can't move your arm, you can't do anything, and you're gonna look at it like I'm crazy, and you're gonna try, you're gonna attempt to do that, but as we start approaching, probably within 24 hours, not even a month, now we're gonna start having some issues with you trying to hold this water, and it's going to be mental, it's going to be physical. The fibers in your arm are gonna start to tear, and it's gonna burn, and if I really required you to hold that ounce of the 4 ounces of water for that whole month, then it's going to cause injury. It's going to be an emotional and mental trepidation for you as well. So now I want you to think about, wow, if that 4 ounces of water is any piece of stress that I have encountered, if it's the daily stress, if it's something that's new that has come on, yeah, I can deal with it if it's only for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe even 90 minutes. But if I hold on to that stress and I don't do something to try to re-energize and recharge myself, and I hold on to it for a month, it can start to mentally, emotionally, and physically tear us down. And think about some of the stresses that we actually have incurred. We're talking about not even just a month. Some things are a couple of months or a year, and think about that being that 4 ounces of water and how much damage that can do. That is the perspective that I wanted to throw out to you, and that is what we're going to utilize some strategies so that we can maneuver through those types of stresses, be able to recharge, re-energize, and not allow it to be something that is physical, mental, and emotionally damaging to you. So next slide, please. So what I want to do, it is in the afternoon, it's after lunch. Many of us either have been sitting down all day, we might have been in meetings and everything. So what I want to do is just start one of the basic recharge, re-energize type of exercises. And we're going to do a group exercise, and I'm going to ask for you to follow along with me. We need to make sure that we're relaxed. And the very first thing that I just want you guys to do is I want you to close your eyes and follow me. Close your eyes, and I want you to envision your happy place. What makes you the happiest? What's put that smile on your face? I know when I close my eyes and I think about my happy space, I am in the Dominican Republic, on the beach, because they have just natural palm trees right there on the beach. I'm sitting underneath the palm trees. The breeze is running through my hair and I hear the ocean water. just instantly with me thinking about that just makes me feel good. I have the feel good hormones raging through me, and anything that might have just been charging me prior to thinking about that, just that second, it has kind of balanced me and I'm feeling good, I'm feeling happy. So think about that happy place. And now, as you're envisioning the happy place, I want you to breathe through your nose and out through your mouth on my count. So let's breathe in, deep breath. And then let it out. Let's do it again. Breathe in from your nose, deep breath. And let it out through your mouth. Keep your eyes closed. One more time, real big deep breath in through your nose. And let it out through your mouth. Perfect. So now I want you to open up your eyes. And like I said, some of us have been sitting in meetings or we've been at our computer all day. Our bodies are not meant or designed to be sitting down and to be cramped up all day long. And it is very, very good for people to stretch. Stretching is vital, 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 vital. And I will, keep coming back to that even if it's just a 2-minute stretch when you get up in the mornings, when you are every hour while you're sitting at your desk, your body needs to stretch. And so we're going to do some stretching exercises just to kind of get our juices flowing for the remainder of this presentation. So I want everybody to sit up straight with your shoulders back. And the very first thing I want you to do is I want you to do shoulder rolls to the back. And I want it to be real deep and exaggerated so that you can really feel the energy and the muscles moving. And I'm just going very slowly, rolling the shoulders backwards. And I'm taking deep breaths while I'm doing it. I'm envisioning my happy place while I'm doing it. I want you to reverse the shoulder rolls. Move forward. Taking my deep breaths. I'm seeing the palm trees. I'm hearing the ocean waves. So now you can open your eyes if you shut your eyes to see what my next stretching move is going to be. I want you to I'm taking my right hand, I'm putting it on the left side of my head, and I'm just gently going to tug and stretch my neck. And oh my goodness, it feels good. If you have a lot of tension and stress, I want you to hold it. Sometimes you don't even realize that the tension is there until you bring some attention to it by doing these types of exercises. So I want you to release, bring your head back up gently, and then I'm going to take my left hand, I'm going to place it onto the right side of my head, and I'm going to gently just pull to the left hand side. I'm going to take a deep breath. And for me, this side is tighter. I can feel it going all the way down my shoulder. It's such a good stretch. It feels good. I'm going to hold it for a little bit. I'm taking a deep breath. I'm hearing the ocean waves. I'm under that palm tree, feeling the breeze. Then I'm going to raise my head up, open my eyes. I'm going to make my head straight. So now for people, especially if you've been at the computer all day long, we're going to concentrate on our hands and fingers. So the very first thing I want you to do is just stretch your hands out and your fingers and try to just spread them as far apart as you can. And then let's just get some energy and some blood circulating in our hands. And then what I really want you to do is I want you to take your hand, doesn't matter which one, and this kind of looks like I'm getting ready to hold a pizza, like I'm getting ready to serve pizza. So that's what I'd like for you to do. And then I want you to take the other hand, and then I want you to take your finger, and I want you to just stretch. And let the stretch, don't hurt yourself, but just pull your finger back to the point of where you can feel a nice, really good stretch. And then we're gonna do the finger next to it. We're going to do the middle finger. Do the pointer finger. Let's do the thumb. And then we're going to do the other hand. So let's get ready to take our pizza and deliver it. And then we're going to take the opposite hand and we're just going to stretch the finger down. Remember to keep breathing. Don't hold your breath. That's important. Let's do the second finger. Gonna do our middle finger. Our pointer finger. And our thumb. This feels really, really, really good. And some people don't even really realize that this is an exercise that really can help them if they're, at their computer all the time. And then one really, really good hand exercise that I like to do is your elbow. We're going to use that as a tool. And right here in the pad of your hand, right, at the bottom of the thumb, if you place your elbow and just relax your fingers and just kind of do circular motions, it really gets in there. And it feels really, really good because we have a lot of tension, especially, for writing, and the whole typing thing is just not very good from a structural perspective for our hands and our fingers. So this works really, really good to get in there. And if you need to lay your hand down on a desk or on your leg or your knee to get in a little deeper, you can do so just to get a little bit more leverage. But it feels really, really good, and it opens up the space between your thumbs and your hands, and it just really, really works wonders for people who are at the computer and typing a lot. So we have focused on the upper part of our body. So what I want you to do is, we can't leave out the bottom part of our body. So if you're sitting in a chair where you're 90 degrees and your legs are on the floor, I just want you to stretch out your right leg. I'm stretching out my right leg. And I am, just like we did this with our fingers, try to do that with your toes and stretch it. And then I just kind of want you to shake your foot around. My foot's going real, real crazy just to kind of get the blood flowing down to your feet. My leg is still extended out straight. And then I want you to extend out straight your left leg and try to do this with your toes and stretch it and stretch it and stretch it. Feels so good. And then I want you to shake your leg and your foot vigorously. Try to get the blood flowing down to your feet. Then you can put your both feet back on the floor, sit up straight, and everybody should feel really, really energized. And that was an exercise. It took maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and I encourage you to go through this, every hour, every 2 hours. If you've been sitting, definitely make sure that you bring focus back to your body to kind of restore it, because just what we did for those couple of minutes, if we have been focusing on something mentally, or if we are very, very anxious, it kind of re-energizes you and kind of restores and resets your body, which we know these things, but we need to just learn to try to practice it. So maybe you might even just want to set your timer on your phone for it to ring, and when you hear it, oh, I just need to sit and do these little exercises so that we can kind of make sure that our bodies stay re-energized. So thank you guys for participating in that exercise. Now let's get into I see Danae right on time. Thank you. Namaste, Danae, as well. Thank you. Yes, definitely needed. Can I have you advance to the next slide, please? Okay, so what is stress? So stress is basically that reaction to any situation that a person feels threatened, or if it brings some type of anxiety to you. And it can be physical, it can be emotional. I mean, stress is just exactly what it sounds like. It does what it sounds. It's stressful. So stress can be positive and it can be negative. So can I have the next slide, please? Some people would be like, well, what is positive stress? Well, I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, there's no such thing as positive stress. And I'm like, oh, yes, it is. And the reason I have those two little twins is because my aunt, she went into labor. She, you know, had the sonograms and everything, and she was expecting to give birth to one child. And after the first child was born, they said, okay, are you ready? The second one is coming. And everybody is like, you know, we only ordered one, but they ended up having twins. Now, talk about something that's really stressful. It was a good thing. It was a blessing. But this is the type of thing that we view as positive stress. So there are definitely positive stressors out there. Is there anybody that wants to share in the chat real quick, anything else that they can think of that might be considered positive stress? Give you a few seconds to type it in. Okay. It could be a little difficult to think of something. Challenges that we need to face. Yeah, exactly. Especially in the work arena, Danae. Like if you got promoted, that's definitely a positive thing, but then it brings on different types of challenges for us that can be, you know, quite stressful. So all these techniques and everything that I'm talking to you about can definitely help you with that. Next slide, please. So there are things that we can control and there are things that we can't control. So external causes of stress, you know, we traveling down 695, 95, we cannot help what in the world the traffic situation is going to be, let alone if there's going to be an accident, then we're set back a little bit more. That can be very stressful at times. We have the workload stresses of doing more with less, especially with cutbacks and, you know, the economy the way that it is, and people get really stressed out with their finances and their money situation. A lot of it can't be controlled. I know, especially with the pandemic, a lot of people are really having financial difficulties because they don't have the income, or their income has been cut in half. It's not something that they caused to have happen. So these are all types of stressors. Just interacting with people. You never know when you wake up in the morning what you're going to encounter when you have to interact with another human. You don't know how they're going to react to things that you say or situations that you present to them, and they can, you know, come across really curt and toy with you. And these things can all be stressors, but you can't control any of these things, right? But next slide, please. There are things that are internal causes of stress that we can kind of have a little bit more control over and manage. So different lifestyle choices. You decide, you personally make decisions about what you're going to do with your life. Am I getting married? Am I not getting married? If things aren't going well, do I get a divorce? Do I not get divorced? Being your own worst critic, like negative self-talk. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough. These are all things that can cause stress. And that can also lead to other lifestyle choices. Well, if I'm not this and if I'm not that, then I'm gonna, you know, lean to alcohol, or I'm gonna lean to smoking cigarettes, or I'm gonna lean to eating food. And all of those choices are what can cause even a greater stressor in your life, because you can actually control those internal causes. Next slide, please. So a lot of times people kind of ignore the warning signs, you know, the danger signs of stress. But I just listed a couple things that kind of can let you know that you're on the verge of getting ready to have a problem if these things are happening, you know, from fatigue, tossing and turning, having trouble sleep, your increased blood pressure, and headaches, migraines, back pains, all of these types of things. And especially if you have more than just one of these symptoms and it seems to be happening all at the same time, can be a warning sign that you are overloading yourself and you're becoming very overwhelmed and you're not doing the self-care. I really believe in self-care and taking the time to just kind of bring it down, kind of like what we did in the very beginning of the session, so that these things don't start manifesting within yourself. Next slide, please. So when people are stressed, these are some of the things that people actually tend to do as a reaction. You know, they're very, you know, much in shock, disbelief, have nightmares, smoke alcohol. We talked about that. People, you know, depending upon what side of the spectrum you're on, they have a loss of appetite or they actually start eating more. I'm a stress eater. So when I'm stressed, I can sit and eat a whole family size bag of Utz potato chips, the cheese, the nacho cheese flavor. And I don't even know that after I've watched, you know, an episode of Friends, which is only a half hour, I have eaten a whole bag of potato chips. Don't even realize it. And that's what stress eating is all about. So that's kind of what stress does for me. But people, you know, have anxiety. Some people end up falling into the anger mode. You know, they start snapping at people and just any little thing sets them off. And, you know, their loved ones, their friends can see, whoa, there's something a little different about this person. And it, you know, it might take that person to say, you know, what's going on? You know, everything okay? Trying to check in with you because you might be going through something they don't know about, but they see that your attitude has changed. So a whole different gamut of things that can cause reactions to stress. Next slide, please. Oh, I see portion control, been there, done that. Oh yeah, Danae, yes, with regards to stress eating. Yeah, but for me, I know it in my head that it's supposed to be portion control, but if I am festering and festering and festering over something, portion control completely does not even register in my brain. All I'm thinking is, these potato chips are so good. You know, they say you can't just eat one, right? So that's one of my downfall, that and pizza. So, okay, so next slide is, it says that, you know, over 40% of our health issues, if we have health issues, 40% of it basically is due to stress. And it's study after study and studies that have been done is basically pointing their finger to stress. Stress causes high blood pressure and heart disease, depression, diabetes, digestive disorders, all of these types of things. So 9 times out of 10, if you have one or definitely more than one of these things, it has some link to a portion of how you deal and cope with stress. So we don't want to have any of this. This is all negative. So what can we do to steer clear of that? Danae knows how to make vegan cheese pizza. I need your recipe because I'm telling you, Lito's cheese pizza is my weakness along with the potato chips. And the only thing that's gotten me through this pandemic is that Lito's does not deliver. Because if Lito's delivered here where I live, I would be probably as big as my house right now. So definitely need that recipe. Next slide, please. So I said self-care. Self-care is what it's all about. We need to make sure that we make a conscious effort to detach ourselves from the things that consume us with our mind and that is kind of consuming us, you know, from a stress perspective. But you know, I see that big circle and it says time. I don't have time. People say I don't have time for self-care because I have work. I have to deal with my spouse when I get home. I have children. I'm, going to school after work, and I'm, a caregiver for my elderly parent. And I'm just plain exhausted by the time I get home. So I don't have time. I have church functions. I'm on the board of the trustees meeting. I don't have time. This is the main thing that I hear from people. I do not have time. And so this is what I say to them. Next slide, please. Okay, if you don't have time, do you have time to be hospitalized? Do you have time to be missing work because you're sick for 3 days to a week because you've come down with something, because your body is telling you that you did not utilize self-care? So your body is going to tell you that now it's time to bring it down and rest. Do you have time to miss your children, your grandchildren, soccer games and choir rehearsals? Do you have time for that? Family reunions, you haven't seen your family in a long time. Do you have time to miss that because you are dealing with some type of health issue? Next slide, please. No, you don't. You do not. You do not have time to say that you don't have time. It's not an option. We have to. It is a must for us to implement self-care, because if not, then all of those things that were in the previous slide is going to happen, and you're going to miss out on life's most precious blessings that have been afforded to you. So we definitely don't want to fall into that trap. And again, a lot of these things we know. We know we know what we know. We know what we're supposed to do. But sometimes it just takes like a seminar like this. Sometimes it might just take that little, reminder, like I said earlier, to just kind of set your clock when you wake up in the morning for every 90 minutes just to go off. And when you hear it, it kind of says, oh, you know what? I need to just take time to do breathing exercises. I need to stretch. And trust me, these methods work. Next slide, please. So the very first thing, the very first stress management strategy that we're going to talk about when we're talking about self-care and taking care of yourself is you have to get moving. Some people just go to work, sit at your desk. You're tired when you go home. You just want to sit down. You want to relax. You fall asleep on the couch. And then the next thing you know, I got to get up. I got to get ready for bed. And then you just go through the whole routine again. And you haven't really exercised. So, exercise and moving produces endorphins. It helps you focus. It actually improves your sleep patterns. And how many people feel so much more energized just because of what we did in the beginning exercise? Anybody? Can you tell the biggest difference? I know Danae, I literally have an indoor walking video keyed up right now. And you are right on track, Danae. You want to keep moving and do something that is fun. If you don't like to run, or if you don't like going to the gym, find something that you really like. For me, I cannot stand running. I cannot stand going to the gym. 6 years ago, I found a passion while I was in the Dominican Republic. I went Latin dancing, and I decided when I came back to the States, I was going to learn how to dance because I did not want to be a wallflower. When I went back to the Dominican Republic, came back, started taking lessons, and that's all she wrote. I am an avid Latin dancer of 6 years, it'll be 7 years in July. And I would go pre-COVID at least a minimum of 4 nights a week. And when I would wear my little band to count my calories, not even knowing it because I'm having so much fun out there doing salsa and bachata and merengue, I was burning 1,000 calories a night in a 4-hour time frame, didn't even realize it. So, find something that you have a passion for. It might be playing tennis, if you like to go swimming. These are things that are fun and you don't really think about it as it being, a workout. And if it's something that you like and you have fun with, then it takes a lot of the pressure off of you of like, I got to go to the gym, I got to get moving and stuff like that. Danae, dance is the answer for many folks. Yes. Quick aside, I had not been Latin dancing since March 12th of 2020 because of COVID. And so on the fly yesterday, and remember, I've been eating all of the potato chips, so I've gained the COVID-20, and I haven't been moving around. You know, it's depressing. The pandemic has completely just mentally, you know, messed with everybody. And so I got a impromptu call yesterday to go to a mansion, a person who has this mansion, but she said, you know what, everybody has had their second shot, but Myra has only had her first shot. And she said, let's just come. It's going to be a handful of people. We're going to wear our masks and let's start getting our bodies trained again so that we're ready to hit the dance floor. And I couldn't pass it up. And I went last night. I thought I was going to be all stiff and sore. I was going to have to call Marla today and tell her that I wasn't going to be able to do the presentation because I couldn't get out of the bed. But amazingly, it's what my body needed. And it was so much fun, and it was very therapeutic. And I tell people, yes, dance definitely is the answer for many folks. So get moving. Find something that you really, really enjoy. Next slide, please. So stress management strategy number 2, taking care of yourself. You got to hold yourself accountable. If you don't hold yourself accountable, then, you know, is there really, we're adults. Is there anybody else that really is going to hold yourself accountable? So you need to make healthy food choices. So, you know, Myra, it's okay to eat potato chips, but again, portion control. And how about just eat potato chips, you know, maybe 15 or 11, you know, once a week, maybe with a sandwich. Or, you know, some people will be like, let's just eat really, really good and healthy for the weekend. I'm going to have one cheat day where I can just go ballistic on the weekends. You know, make those conscious decisions with regards to your food choices. If you're drinking alcohol instead of drinking, you know, a cocktail every day, you know, once a week or on special occasions, do it in moderation. You definitely want to avoid nicotine because that's just not good for your body, no way how you shape it, form it, or whatever. Common sense things that we, you know, always hear, but it's good to just be refreshed in our memories. Green leafy veggies, fruits, proteins, increase your whole grains. And a lot of people don't realize that if you don't get your appropriate amount of sleep, that really can affect your health, because while you are asleep, your body goes into a mode of homeostasis, and that's where your body starts to repair things and starts to heal things that it can't do while you're conscious and up and moving. And so your body needs that time to just kind of mellow out so that it can jumpstart you back into any healing that it wants to or needs to do, and any type of restoration. So, you know, uninterrupted sleep is very, very important. So you want to make sure that you inject that into your schedule. Business Zooms need to include a dance break, for real. And I have therapists that are on my my team. I have 20 different Zumba and yoga instructors. We're going to talk about that, but some of them do dance routines to kind of get people moving. And we'll talk about that, Danae, a little bit more as we move along. Next slide, please. So stress management strategy number 3, taking care of yourself. Relax. You know, meditation, if you can just go to YouTube and just find a nice little 15, 30-minute meditation, you know, set that clock so that you know, hey, I need to just kind of step away from the day-to-day. I need to just go through a guided meditation. It actually does wonders for restoring your mind, your body, your soul, your spirit. If you're in traffic, like I had indicated, external stressors that you have no control over, instead of listening to, you know, heavy metal, hard rock, hip hop, or whatever, if you play some very calming music like classical or just some relaxation music while you're in that stressful situation, believe it or not, it really does help. You got to try it. So don't knock it until you try it, right? The visualization exercises, I can't tell you how much that helps me when I am just visualizing that I'm under those palm trees. It just makes me feel good. It just makes me feel happy. And we all need that on a daily basis. So there also, I believe that people speak things into existence, and I believe that you create your own reality. So what you say, what you think, what you portray is what comes back to you. It's the law of attraction. So practice being very positive and believing what you say and believing what you feel. And if you say things like, I am peaceful and calm, and I am stress-free, and you believe it, and you say it and you practice it, the law of attraction says that what you say and what you do the most of is what comes back the most to you. So the more you say it, the more you really believe it, the more you try to walk it, the more you will bring that peace and bring that calmness to you, because the universe is going to say, well, that's what is in the forefront of their minds. That's what they think, that's what they believe. So we have no choice but to provide that back to them. So I'm a very, very firm believer in positive affirmations as well. All righty, next slide, please. Okay, so Danae, as I was talking about, I believe that through the Expo, Marla has spoken, several times about the discount that we are offering people for Black History Month. And my company definitely wanted to demonstrate that we definitely are on board and want to provide that as well. So what Labadi Massage is going to offer is 3 different things. And typically, the things that I'm going to talk about in detail, we don't do on an individual basis, we do from a corporate perspective. So Danae, like I was talking about, I have a contract with Howard County government where we do virtual services for yoga, Zumba, and cardio fitness. And not just with Howard County government, but Care First is one of my biggest clients. United Healthcare is one of my biggest clients. And we do organizations like if you're in a fraternity or sorority, or if you're in a church group where we have a bulk of people and you come and say, we want one of these services provided for our employees or for the people in our organization. We want it once a week, twice a week. We want it once a month, whatever it is, we can customize it. And so I know for Howard County, we have about 10 or 15 different virtual classes, and the virtual classes didn't even come to be until COVID, right? So there is one good thing that did come out of COVID. So we have yoga, Zumba, cardio fitness, and the cool thing about it is from a corporate perspective, how we do it in Bach, we provide it virtually. Like I said, I have 20-some instructors, and we have a smorgasbord of all different classes that you can take that can cater to those who have never done any of it before, for the beginners, people who have done the Zumba and the yoga, the meditation on an intermediate level, and then we have different classes for the advanced individuals as well. And then we have people who might have had surgery and injury and they really aren't that mobile. We have classes that we present where you can do chair yoga. We have a desk stretch yoga that we offer in the middle of the day for those people, since COVID. I think it's at 12 o'clock for Howard County government people. They, chime in, and it's a desk stretch. And it's guided, and then I have people that will want to come in for an advanced yoga session. They're morning people, so we schedule it for 7 a.m. in the morning. We can schedule things for 7 p.m. at night. So we even have different versions of Zumba and yoga for those that are aging. People who want to get moving, when we say get moving, but they really, don't have the ability or the agility to do so. There is called Zumba Gold for those in the aging population. So we can customize it for whoever and whatever. And basically, anybody who might be interested, who's hearing this, if your organization or someone, a spouse, a family member that isn't a part of the Expo, you think that this might be advantageous, then the URL at the bottom and the email is how you can get in contact with me. But for the promotion Typically, a 1 hour meditation or yoga or Zumba session is $90. So we are going to encourage you guys, and I have talked with my instructors, we will be willing to offer you one-on-one. So it doesn't have to be the corporate group rate and everything, but this is just for the promotion. For $75, you get in contact with us and use that code. We can set up either one hour meditation session for you to just kind of zone out, or we can set up one Yin Restorative Yoga session for you, which it kind of talks about what that is. It's not the typical yoga. I personally do not like typical yoga. That downward dog thing just doesn't, set well with my wrist. And I don't like being in poses, for a long period of time that my body, standing up and stuff. So restorative Yin yoga, I really like, because you're laying down or you're on the floor. And it basically is just an extended stretch. You'll hold a position, but it's like, like when we were doing this, you hold it for like 2 or 3 minutes so that the muscle fibers can really melt and make you more flexible. And let me jump back up to the meditation. The guided meditation is literally where a person is going to put you in an environment where you hear the water, or your eyes are going to be closed, and they're going to make you aware of your breath and every sensation that your body feels, and they're going to walk you through. I remember my first meditation, yoga nidra. They walked me through the mountains in the winter, and it was snow, and a deer just kind of looked at you, and you kind of follow the story, and it just kind of takes you on an outer body experience that is something that is very unusual, but very, very restorative, that I think you should try. And then again, if you are a yogi, so we have a 1 hour session for yoga 1, 2, or 3, which is beginner, intermediate, or advanced, if you want to take advantage of that. So $75, it's usually $90. It's one-on-one. We're offering that as a promotion. So again, please utilize it. The URL again and the email is at the bottom, and we don't typically do that, but if you do know someone that can benefit from the group sessions, please get in contact with us. The business community needs this. I hope they are listening and taking action on this. Danae, definitely. Next slide, please. So other services that Labadi Massage offers, prior to COVID, the main company is massage and reflexology. I have 63 massage therapists and reflexologists. We are in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and we do corporate massage. So, and corporate reflexology, where we actually go into the corporations, go into the companies or the organizations, and we do 10, 15, 20-minute chair massages. And so everything got shut down on March 13th. So we haven't really been doing anything with our corporate contracts, although they're telling me that now that people are getting vaccinated and the curve isn't spiked anymore, it's starting to go down, we're going to start getting calls, and we should be back up and running, if everything goes the way that everyone is anticipating, within May, June timeframe, we'll, start regaining our normal lives. Even when we start doing that, we are definitely going to follow CDC regulations and be very compliant. Because we're touching people and we're in, our space. So, but prior to COVID, these are the types of things that we did. It would be a 2-hour minimum. We would go out. Sometimes I would get a call and say, I need 12 therapists at University of Maryland Hospital. I need them from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. and I would be able to fill that request. And we would do like I said, 10, 15, 20-minute chair massages, or, they might break it up, and some of my reflexologists would be there to do the 10, 20, 15-minute reflexology sessions. So these are other services that we offer as well. Danae, needed in the virtual space, corporate Zooms. I don't know if you're talking about, well, I wish we could do massage if you're talking about massage and reflexology. Haven't quite figured out how to do that virtually, right? even with COVID, we need corporate Zoom of our services. Okay, I hear you. And, let's talk offline. Okay, we definitely can talk offline about that a little further. So next slide, please. All right, so I want to kind of do another group exercise. We've been sitting here now for 39 minutes. And I'm a firm believer. Did I not say stretch, 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 stretch? That's what we have to do. We have to make sure that our bodies stretch, stretch, stretch. So what I'd like for everybody to do right now is to sit up nice and tall in your chair, again, with your shoulders back. This time we're going to work on some other things that we didn't catch in the earlier part of our session. So I want everybody to interlock their hands, and I want them to stretch up to the sky. And I just want you to try to reach for the sky and just reach and reach and reach. And it feels so good because I have not stretched all day. And it feels so amazing. Make sure you breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. And then I want you to interlock your hands behind your back. If you have to kind of scoot like I do to the edge of the chair. But interlock, and then I want you to kind of push down towards the ground. Make sure your shoulders are pushed back and you feel the stretch here in the upper part of your shoulders and in your chest. It feels so good. Hold that stretch. These are things that you can do at your desk, or sometimes people just want to stand up and do these stretches. It's good to kind of stand up if you can. That always, I think, works a little bit better. And now what I want you to do is I just kind of want you to be lazy and lean over to your right side and let your hand just kind of act like you're reaching for the floor. You're going to feel that nice stretch in the left part of your side, your hip. And then I want you to sit up straight, and then we're just going to fall, be real lazy to the left-hand side. Let your left hand try to reach for the floor. Nice stretch to the right-hand side. Oh my goodness, it feels good. And I want you to sit up straight, and let's just close our eyes and let's just take one big deep breath in through the nose. Hold it, hold it, hold it, and let it out through the mouth. Very good. All right, so Danae, group exercise and meditation breaks, corporate Zoom, definitely. Now is the time if we have any questions or answers. I definitely make myself available. If people don't have any questions through the chat this afternoon, you have my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me and we can talk about what some of your specific needs may be or some ideas. I'm definitely open to ideas. So any questions out there right now?
Thank you so much, Myra. I followed along. That's why you were like, next slide. And I'm like, wait, she's not ready. She's exhaling. Anyway, Myra, please post the link in the chat. That's what I see, because your email link, your website and email link in the chat for us. And thank you so much for sharing this time with us.
All righty. I'm gonna post it right now. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this. It was much needed for me as well. Thank you.